The unforgiving chill of pre-dawn bit through Elias Vance's worn canvas jacket, a familiar bite that had greeted him for 73 years on this very patch of earth. His arthritic fingers, gnarled like ancient oak roots, tightened around the steaming mug of synth coffee, its warmth a fleeting comfort against the biting wind. From the porch of his sprawling, yet perpetually quiet, farmhouse, Elias surveyed the fields, a vast geometry of nutrient-rich soil that stretched towards a horizon smudged with the neon glow of distant hypercities. This land, his land, was a defiant bastion of tradition in a future obsessed with progress, a future he often felt utterly disconnected from. He was a relic, much like the antique tilling drone whirring faintly in the distance, a testament to simpler times. Elias lived an existence defined by solitude, a self-imposed exile from the bustling, interconnected world that hummed just beyond his property lines. The quiet was a constant, almost tangible presence, a silence filled only by the wind and the ghosts of memory. Most prominent among these was Lyra, his daughter, whose laughter once echoed across these very fields. Her absence, a raw wound even after all these years, had carved deep valleys of grief into his soul, turning him into the reclusive figure he was today. Every sunrise was a fresh reminder of the daughter he had lost too soon, and every sunset painted the sky with the colors of his unyielding sorrow. He often wondered if the earth itself mourned with him, absorbing his tears into its ancient soil. Suddenly, a shudder, deep and resonant, rippled through the ground beneath his feet, rattling the ceramic mug in his hand. The faint whirring of the tilling drone hitched, then died entirely. Elias, his senses sharpened by years of living off the land, instantly knew this was no natural tremor. A low, guttural roar like the dying breath of some colossal beast tore through the air, followed by a blinding flash of orange light that painted the pre-dawn sky with an infernal glow. His gaze snapped towards the north field, the one teeming with the season's most promising crop of protein-enriched legumes. There, where rows of verdant green had once stood in perfect alignment, a colossal, smoking chasm now marred the landscape. Whatever had fallen, it had done so with an apocalyptic fury, obliterating everything in its path. A dark plume of acrid smoke spiraled lazily into the sky, a stark monument to the sudden, violent intrusion. His solitary peace, the carefully constructed shell he had built around himself, had been shattered. His crops, the very lifeblood of his farm and his existence, were incinerated, reduced to a smoldering ruin. A surge of primal anger, a feeling he hadn't truly felt since Lyra's passing, ignited within him. This was more than just property damage, it was an invasion, a desecration of his sanctuary. He gripped the railing, knuckles white, his mind racing. What could possibly cause such devastation? It was too large for a failed orbital freight drone, too fierce for any known atmospheric phenomenon. His heart hammered an unsteady rhythm against his ribs. The world, it seemed, was determined to remind him that even in his secluded corner, peace was an illusion. The strange, almost metallic scent of the smoke filled his nostrils, a scent utterly alien to the familiar aromas of soil and growing things. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that his quiet life was irrevocably altered. This was just the beginning. To uncover what truly landed in Elias's field, and to follow his incredible journey, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Elias pushed open the creaking farmhouse door, the sound echoing through the sudden silence that had fallen over the fields. The initial shock had given way to a potent blend of fear and a gnawing, insistent curiosity. He grabbed his trusty, if somewhat antiquated, field scanner, a bulky device with a flickering monochrome screen that still offered reliable readings, unlike the sleek new models constantly needing system updates. His boots crunched on the dew-kissed gravel as he started towards the north field, the smoke plume now less angry, more a silent testament to the catastrophe. Every instinct screamed at him to stay put, to wait for the inevitable government response, the military intervention he fully expected. Surely, something this immense couldn't go unnoticed. Yet, as he walked, his gaze sweeping the empty expanse of sky, there was nothing. No sirens, no distant choppers, no flashing lights. Just the vast, indifferent expanse of his own land, and the ruined field stretching before him. This unnerving silence amplified the mystery. He picked his way around the fringe of the destruction, the ground still radiating a faint, unnatural warmth beneath his feet. The air tasted metallic, sharp, and utterly alien. When he finally reached the edge of the crater, he stopped, stunned. It wasn't just a crater. It was like a massive, jagged tear in the earth, and at its heart lay the wreckage. It wasn't a ship, not in any conventional sense Elias understood. Forget the angular, riveted plates of human spacecraft. This was something else entirely. Its surface gleamed with an iridescent sheen, a color that shifted between deep violet and midnight blue under the emerging daylight. It was sleek, impossibly streamlined, yet riddled with gaping wounds, some still smoldering. The material itself seemed organic, like polished obsidian that had been somehow grown, not manufactured. There were no visible seams, no rivets, no recognizable propulsion systems. Jagged edges protruded at odd angles, some still oozing a thick, viscous liquid that shimmered with an inner light, quickly solidifying into something crystalline. Elias's hand, clutching the scanner, trembled slightly. The device, usually so steadfast, was now emitting a high-pitched whine, its screen a chaotic kaleidoscope of scrambled data. It was clearly utterly overwhelmed by the energy readings emanating from the craft. Cautiously, Elias moved closer, stepping over charred remnants of what were once his prize legumes, now just carbonized husks. The sheer scale of the object was breathtaking, dwarfing his farmhouse by a factor of 10. He found himself drawn to a particularly large fissure in its side, a ragged maw that seemed to hum with a low, deep resonance. A strange, almost melodious sound, like wind chimes made of liquid light, emanated from within. The interior was awash in a soft, ethereal glow, a light that pulsed gently, illuminating the twisted metal and strange, bioluminescent growths clinging to the internal structures. Elias hesitated, his heart thumping like a drum against his ribs. Every fiber of his being screamed caution, but his curiosity, fueled by the sheer improbability of it all, urged him forward. He peered into the vast, silent opening, the unknown beckoning him inwards. The air inside felt strangely warm, humid, carrying a faint, sweet scent, unlike anything he had ever experienced. His breath hitched in his throat, a sense of profound wonder mixed with an almost childlike fear taking hold. The ethereal glow beckoned, a silent, irresistible siren call from the depths of the alien vessel. Elias, overriding every instinct for self-preservation, took a tentative step across the jagged threshold, his old farming boots scraping against the impossibly smooth, yet now fractured, surface of the ship's interior. The sweet, humid air enveloped him, a stark contrast to the crisp morning chill outside. The light, originating from no discernible source, cast long, dancing shadows that played tricks on his aging eyes. It wasn't harsh, but diffused, like moonlight filtered through ancient forest leaves, lending an almost sacred atmosphere to the scene of destruction. He moved deeper into the cavernous space, navigating around twisted metal and strange, plant-like growths that pulsed with their own faint light. His field scanner, still a useless cacophony of static, hung forgotten from his belt. His focus narrowed, drawn by a small, central chamber that glowed more intensely than the surrounding areas. As he approached, a gasp escaped his lips, a shaky, disbelieving sound. There, amidst the wreckage, lying seemingly undisturbed on a cushioned console that remained miraculously intact, was a girl. She appeared young, no older than Lyra would have been in her early 20s, perhaps even younger. Her form was slender, almost delicate, yet she emanated an aura of profound tranquility. Her skin, pale as untouched snow, seemed to shimmer faintly under the ship's soft illumination. Long, silken hair, an impossible shade of iridescent silver, fanned out around her head, catching the light and refracting it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. She was dressed in a simple, form-fitting garment of a deep, midnight blue that seemed to absorb and reflect the light simultaneously. Elias instinctively knelt beside her, his old knees protesting the sudden movement. He reached out a trembling hand, hovering just inches above her chest, half expecting to feel the chill of death. But no, a faint, steady rise and fall of her chest was visible, a testament to life amidst the chaos. She was breathing, shallow but rhythmic. Unconscious, yes, but undeniably alive. A wave of unexpected relief washed over him, momentarily, eclipsing the sheer impossibility of the situation. Who was she? How could a human girl be inside an alien spacecraft? His gaze drifted upwards, drawn to her face, a visage of serene beauty untouched by the violence of the crash. And then, he saw them. Her eyelids fluttered, a slight tremor passing through her delicate frame, but they remained closed. He leaned closer, his heart seizing in his chest as he focused on the barely visible slits. Beneath the silver lashes, a sliver of color was revealed, a color that twisted his gut with a sudden, agonizing familiarity. Her eyes. They were a vibrant, unforgettable emerald green, the exact, precise shade of his late daughter, Lyra's. The very same green that had sparkled with mischief and kindness, the very same green that had reflected the boundless love she held for him. It was an uncanny, almost cruel echo from a past that haunted his every waking moment. The world tilted on its axis. The alien craft, the impossible journey, the very fabric of reality seemed to unravel around him. A phantom ache bloomed in his chest, a memory so sharp it felt like a fresh wound. He saw Lyra in her, saw the youthful innocence, the promise. Years of grief, carefully compartmentalized and buried deep within his stoic exterior, surged back, hot and relentless. He squeezed his eyes shut for a moment, trying to dispel the mirage, to convince himself it was just a trick of the light, a cruel twist of fate. But when he opened them again, those brilliant, unforgettable green eyes, though still closed, were undeniably there. They were Lyra's eyes, unmistakably, undeniably Lyra's. The alien nature of his surroundings, the inexplicable circumstances of her presence, all faded into insignificance. All that mattered, all that existed in that moment, was the overwhelming, gut-wrenching recognition of those eyes. Tears, hot and unexpected, traced paths down his weathered cheeks, tasting of salt and unshed sorrow. This wasn't just a girl, this was a ghost, a living, breathing specter of his beloved daughter, manifest in the most impossible of places. He reached out, his hand trembling uncontrollably, and gently brushed a strand of silver hair away from her face, his touch feather-light, almost reverent. The girl stirred again, a soft sigh escaping her lips, and Elias felt a profound, almost primal connection snap into place. He was no longer just an old farmer who had found a crashed ship. He was a father, staring into the face of a miracle, or perhaps, a devastating, beautiful hallucination. His heart ached with a longing so intense it was almost unbearable. As Elias knelt there, his hand still hovering near her silken hair, a faint tremor rippled through the girl's delicate frame. Her eyelids fluttered once more, slower this time, and then, with an almost imperceptible effort, they parted. Elias found himself staring into those impossibly green eyes, now wide and unfocused, reflecting the muted glow of the ship's interior back at him. A soft, almost inaudible sigh escaped her lips, a sound so fragile it seemed borne on the humid air itself. Her gaze, though still hazy with unconsciousness, seemed to fix on his face, scanning his weathered features with an innocent, almost childlike wonder. Then, as if collecting every ounce of strength she possessed, a single word, barely a whisper, floated from her lips, cutting through the silence of the alien craft like a shard of ice. "Grandpa?" The sound reverberated through Elias's very bones, shaking him to his core. The single word, spoken in perfect, albeit weak, English, struck him with the force of a physical blow. Grandpa. Him. Elias Vance, the reclusive old farmer who hadn't heard that endearing term since Lyra was a toddler. His mind reeled, struggling to reconcile the impossible. This was an alien girl, found in a crashed spaceship from beyond the stars, yet she had spoken his language, and used a term of endearment reserved for the deepest familial bonds. Confusion, thick and disorienting, swirled around the grief and recognition that had only moments ago consumed him. How could she possibly know that word? How could she know him? And why, oh why, did her voice, though frail, carry such a haunting echo of Lyra's own playful tones. His initial impulse was disbelief, a fierce rejection of what his ears had just heard. It had to be a mistake, a hallucination brought on by shock and sorrow. Perhaps her technology, somehow, had scanned his memories, plucked the most painful, most cherished word from his past and uttered it as a cruel, impossible taunt. He shook his head slowly, trying to clear the fog of unreality that had descended upon him. Yet, her gaze remained fixed, those vibrant green eyes holding a depth of innocence that seemed utterly earnest, utterly genuine. There was no malice, no trickery in their depths, only a profound, almost desperate plea for connection. A strange warmth began to spread through Elias's chest, pushing past the confusion and the bewildered disbelief. This wasn't some cold, calculating alien. This was a fragile, vulnerable being, lost and far from home, who had somehow connected with his deepest longing. The word "grandpa" wasn't just a sound, it was an anchor dragging him back from the precipice of his own bewildered thoughts and rooting him firmly in the present. He saw not an alien, but a lost child, perhaps a child who desperately needed comfort and protection. The striking resemblance to Lyra, the unnerving familiarity of her eyes, the unexpected warmth in her voice, it all coalesced into an overwhelming, undeniable sensation. Despite the monumental questions swirling in his mind, questions about her origin, her purpose, and the very nature of reality, a primal, ancient instinct surged through him. It was the same fierce, protective urge he had felt when Lyra was small, when the world felt too big and too dangerous for her delicate form. This creature, whatever she was, awoke that dormant paternal fire within him. He found himself extending his hand fully this time, not just hovering, but gently, almost reverently, touching her forehead. Her skin was incredibly soft, warm, and pulsed with a faint, barely perceptible energy beneath his rough fingertips. The touch seemed to steady her. Another soft sigh escaped her, and a tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips, a fleeting expression of relief. Elias felt it then, unequivocally. This wasn't just a stranger, this was someone who, for reasons he could not yet fathom, was reaching out to him, specifically to him. She was lost, vulnerable, and in some unfathomable way, connected to his deepest sorrow and his most cherished memories. The need to protect her, to shield her from whatever dangers might lurk outside this crashed vessel, from the prying eyes of a world that would never understand, became an immediate, almost overwhelming priority. He would get her out of this wreckage. He would keep her safe. The how and the why could wait. For now, there was only the fierce, unyielding instinct of a grandfather. With a renewed sense of purpose, a fierce protectiveness he hadn't felt in years, Elias carefully slid his arms beneath the girl, marveling at her feather-light weight. He lifted her gently from the wreckage, her silver hair spilling over his arm like liquid moonlight. The confined space of the alien ship, once filled with an almost suffocating mystery, now felt like a temporary shelter. Carrying her, he navigated the twisted metal and glowing organic filaments, his old joints protesting with every step, but his resolve unshakable. He moved with a speed he hadn't thought himself capable of, driven by the urgency to get her to safety, to the familiar, if rustic, sanctuary of his farmhouse. The morning air, though cool, felt like a breath of fresh life after the strange, humid atmosphere of the ship. He cradled her close, her head resting against his shoulder, feeling the faint, steady rhythm of her breath. As they emerged from the crater and began the slow walk back to the house, Elias glanced down at her, her face serene even in unconsciousness. "Ilara," he whispered, the name Lyra had adored, a name that meant sunbeam, rolling off his tongue. "That's what I'll call you, Ilara." It felt right, a bridge between his past and this impossible, bewildering present. He carried her directly into the farmhouse, bypassing the damage in the fields, his mind already formulating plans. He laid her gently on the worn sofa in the living room, the one Lyra used to curl up on with her storybooks. The room, usually so quiet, now felt imbued with a fragile, new presence. Elias immediately set about assessing her condition. Her skin, still unnaturally pale, had a subtle, ethereal glow, less pronounced in the farmhouse light but still noticeable. He ran his callous fingers over her forehead, checking for fever, and felt only a cool, smooth surface. There were no visible injuries from the crash, not a scratch, not a bruise, which struck him as profoundly strange given the devastation outside. He checked her pulse, finding it strong and steady, but oddly slow, like a deep, resonant hum rather than a rapid beat. He noticed the delicate bones in her hands, long and graceful, and the way her fingers tapered to almost impossibly fine points. Her movements, even in her sleep, had an unnatural, fluid grace, as if gravity held less sway over her. He brought her a glass of water, hoping she would awaken soon, and sat beside her, simply watching. He felt a profound sense of responsibility settle over him, an echo of the early days of Lyra's life. Elara, his Elara, stirred again, her eyelids fluttering. This time, her eyes opened fully, those captivating green irises absorbing the warm light of the farmhouse. She looked at him, then around the room, her gaze lingering on the faded photographs on the mantelpiece, pictures of Lyra as a child, then as a young woman. A flicker of something unreadable passed through her eyes, a shadow of recognition, perhaps, or a deeper understanding that Elias couldn't comprehend. She took a shallow breath, her chest rising and falling slowly. Elias offered her the water, and she took it with a delicate, almost ritualistic movement, sipping slowly. He could see the exhaustion clinging to her, a residue of whatever journey she had undertaken. But beneath that exhaustion, there was a quiet strength, an otherworldly serenity that defied her delicate appearance. He observed the subtle differences, the almost imperceptible glow, the unnaturally slow pulse, the ethereal grace, and knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that while she looked human, Elara was anything but. She was a mystery, a miracle, and now, inextricably, a part of his quiet, solitary life. The silence of the farmhouse, once a monument to his grief, was now filled with a simmering, hopeful anticipation. Elara, her green eyes now fully open and alert, took the glass from his hand, her slender fingers brushing his, sending a jolt through Elias. She sipped the water slowly, her gaze never leaving his, a silent question in their emerald depths. Elias cleared his throat, the sound rough in the quiet room. Can you understand me, Elara?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. He tried a few more simple sentences, questions about her well-being, about what she might remember. Her responses were fragmented, a soft murmur of sounds that seemed to almost form words, but dissolved into a melodious, alien cadence before he could grasp their meaning. It was clear her understanding of human language, beyond that one startling word, was limited, perhaps even non-existent. She tilted her head slightly, studying his face with an intense focus that made him feel utterly transparent, as if she could see directly into his soul. He tried again, this time speaking slower, enunciating each word carefully, pointing to himself, then to her. "Elias," he said, tapping his chest. "Elara," he repeated, gesturing towards her. A faint frown creased her brow, a fleeting shadow of frustration, before she offered a small, hesitant nod. It was a gesture of polite acknowledgement, not true comprehension. The language barrier was immense, a towering wall between them, yet it didn't feel insurmountable. There was something in her eyes, a deep, ancient wisdom that seemed to transcend mere words. Those eyes. Elias found himself drawn to them repeatedly, lost in their vibrant green. They held not just the hue of Lyra's, but a profound depth, an almost luminous quality that seemed to shift and change with the ambient light. He would catch himself staring, searching their depths for answers, for any clue, any echo of his lost daughter. Was this truly just a coincidence, a cruel biological mirage? Or was there something more, something profoundly connected to Lyra's very essence? He found himself mentally comparing her subtle gestures, the slight tilt of her head, the way her hand would occasionally flutter to her chest, to Lyra's own mannerisms. Sometimes, in the soft glow of the farmhouse lamp, he could almost convince himself he was looking at Lyra herself, grown and somehow transformed. The thought was both comforting and terrifying, a glimmer of hope laced with a bitter ache of longing. Despite the profound lack of verbal communication, a silent bond began to form between them. Elara seemed to understand his unspoken concern, his gentle offers of food and comfort. She watched him with an unwavering intensity as he moved about the farmhouse, preparing a simple meal, tending to the few chores that demanded his attention. When he spoke to her, even though she didn't seem to grasp the words, she would listen attentively, her head cocked, those intelligent green eyes tracking his every expression. He started to communicate through gestures, through quiet touches, through the shared moments of silence that filled the old farmhouse. He would point to the fields outside, then to his heart, trying to convey his sorrow over the destruction, his connection to the land. She would respond with a soft hum, a gentle placement of her hand over his, a gesture that spoke volumes without a single uttered word. He learned to interpret her subtle shifts in expression, the almost imperceptible narrowing of her eyes when she was curious, the faint luminescence that sometimes pulsed beneath her skin when she was agitated or, he suspected, experiencing a strong emotion. She, in turn, began to mirror some of his own gestures, a hand resting on her chin when deep in thought, a slight tilt of her head when observing something new. He found himself talking to her constantly. Though he knew she didn't understand the semantics, he hoped she understood the intent, the warmth, the sheer human connection he was trying to forge. He narrated his day, spoke of the weather, shared old stories of Lyra, of the farm, of his life, hoping that the cadence of his voice, the emotion in his tone, would bridge the chasm of language. The silence that had once been a heavy shroud of grief now felt different, imbued with a quiet companionship, a sense of shared, unfolding mystery. He saw in Elara not just a lost alien, but a being who, despite her extraordinary origins, possessed a vulnerability, a need for connection that mirrored his own. The profound strangeness of the situation melted away, replaced by the simple, powerful truth of two beings finding solace in each other's presence. He still yearned for answers, for her to tell him her story, to explain her connection to Lyra, but for now, the quiet, growing emotional bond was enough. It was more than enough. It was a warmth he hadn't realized he so desperately missed. The quiet, growing emotional bond was more than enough, a warmth Elias hadn't realized he so desperately missed. But even as this fragile connection deepened within the farmhouse walls, the reality of the crashed ship, an undeniable beacon of anomaly, weighed heavily on his mind. The acrid scent of the wreckage still occasionally drifted on the wind, a stark reminder that their isolated peace was precarious. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that it was only a matter of time before the outside world caught up, before the cold, impersonal forces of government and science descended upon his remote farm. They wouldn't see Elara as a lost child needing protection. They would see her as an object of study, a specimen, a strategic asset. The thought sent a shiver down his spine, a primal fear for her safety that ignited a fierce, protective defiance within him. He couldn't allow that to happen. His instincts, sharpened by a lifetime of battling the elements and the encroachment of progress, screamed for secrecy. He immediately began the arduous task of concealing the crash site. Using his oldest, most robust farming drone, he began to systematically remove debris, pushing it into the deepest, thickest parts of the surrounding forest. He set up a makeshift barricade of old equipment and felled trees around the perimeter of the field, creating a visual barrier from any prying eyes that might pass overhead. He shut down his farm's external communications, rerouted delivery drones to a neighbor's property, creating a plausible veneer of normalcy while simultaneously cutting off any direct lines of inquiry. He restricted his own movements, venturing out only when absolutely necessary, always with a wary eye on the sky, a sense of constant vigilance now his shadow. The farm, once a symbol of his solitary existence, became a fortress, its ancient fields now guarding a profound secret. Elara, observing his frantic efforts with those remarkably sentient green eyes, seemed to understand the gravity of his actions, even if she didn't grasp the specifics. She moved through the farmhouse with a quiet grace, her presence a calming counterpoint to Elias's growing anxiety. Then, one afternoon, as Elias was fretting over a small patch of wilting lavender, a plant Lyra had cherished, something extraordinary happened. Elara, having watched him with her usual intense gaze, reached out a slender hand, her fingertips barely brushing the dying petals. A soft, almost imperceptible silver luminescence pulsed beneath her skin, emanating outwards, and within moments, the lavender plant visibly perked up, its leaves unfurling, its faded blooms regaining a vibrant, healthy purple. Elias stared, dumbfounded, his jaw slack. It was a subtle act, almost unnoticeable if one wasn't actively looking, but it was undeniable. The plant, which had been on the verge of expiring, was now thriving, radiating a vitality it hadn't possessed in weeks. This wasn't just a coincidence. It was an echo of something truly alien, a glimpse into her true nature. He thought back to the strange, organic material of the ship, the bioluminescent growths within. It wasn't just her physical appearance that was unique. Her very essence seemed connected to life itself, to regeneration. Later that evening, he noticed a tiny scratch he'd received earlier while moving a piece of debris, a minor thing barely worth a thought, had completely vanished. He distinctly remembered the sting, the tiny bead of blood. Now there was nothing, not even a faint red line. He hadn't seen Elara touch it, but the idea, a quiet, unsettling certainty, began to bloom in his mind. These weren't just minor quirks. These were abilities, powers that hinted at something far grander, far more profound than he could have ever imagined. The little girl with Lyra's eyes was more than just a lost child. She was a harbinger of wonders, a living embodiment of the impossible, and the fragile secret he was desperate to protect felt even heavier, even more precious. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the world would destroy her if they ever found out. The little girl with Lyra's eyes was more than just a lost child. She was a harbinger of wonders, a living embodiment of the impossible, and the fragile secret he was desperate to protect felt even heavier, even more precious. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the world would destroy her if they ever found out. This realization, coupled with Elara's quiet presence, acted like a key, unlocking a floodgate of memories Elias had long kept damned. Lyra. Everywhere he looked, he saw her. Elara's slightly tilted head when observing a new object, the way her hand would sometimes unconsciously trace patterns on the table. They were echoes, ghosts of Lyra's own mannerisms, now played out by this alien child. He'd find himself staring at Elara's delicate profile as she sat by the window, sketching intricate alien patterns on a discarded napkin, and suddenly he'd be transported back to a sun-drenched afternoon, watching Lyra meticulously color in a fantastical creature from one of her old storybooks. The intensity in Elara's green eyes, so like Lyra's, especially when she was focused, was almost unbearable. He remembered Lyra's fierce determination, her insatiable curiosity, the way she would lose herself completely in a task or a story. Elara, despite the language barrier, manifested a similar single-mindedness, a quiet absorption that resonated deeply within him, stirring the tender, bruised corners of his heart. Every gesture, every subtle expression from Elara, seemed to trigger another vivid flashback, painting his mind with Lyra's image, her laughter, her boundless energy. It was a beautiful, agonizing torment. The burden of the secret, the constant vigilance, began to take its toll. Elias found himself sleeping less, his mind a whirlwind of contingency plans and worst-case scenarios. He'd jump at every unfamiliar sound, his heart hammering against his ribs, convinced that the authorities had finally found them. The fear of discovery was a constant, gnawing presence, a tightening knot in his stomach. But then he would look at Elara, perhaps finding her engrossed in observing a beetle on the porch, a look of profound fascination on her face, and the paternal instincts would surge, overriding the fear. He had lost Lyra once. He would not lose this echo, this precious semblance of her, to the cold, unfeeling machinery of the world. This new purpose, this desperate need to protect, gave him a strength he hadn't known he still possessed. It was a terrifying, exhilarating weight, but one he embraced without hesitation. Slowly, painstakingly, a deeper understanding began to blossom between them. Elias continued to talk, narrating his life, describing the farm, pointing to objects, and naming them. Elara, in turn, began to match words to the sensory input she was receiving. He'd point to the sun, repeat, "Sun," and she would echo it, a soft, almost metallic inflection in her voice. When he'd point to the old oak tree outside, explaining how Lyra used to climb it, Alara would place a delicate hand on the rough bark, her eyes closing for a moment, as if absorbing its history. She seemed to grasp emotions more readily than facts. When he spoke of loss, a profound sadness would tinge her vibrant green eyes. When he recounted a joyful memory of Lyra, a faint, almost translucent glow would emanate from her skin, a gentle shimmer that spoke of shared warmth. He began to learn her subtle alien differences not just through observation, but through her attempts to communicate. She showed an innate understanding of natural systems, effortlessly coaxing wilting plants back to life, or calming restless farm animals with a gentle touch. There were moments when she would simply gaze into the distance, her eyes unfocused, and Elias had the distinct impression she was listening to frequencies beyond human hearing, or seeing patterns invisible to his aging eyes. She could differentiate between various types of soil by touch alone, and her subtle manipulation of energies, like the healing of the lavender, became more frequent, almost a natural extension of her being. She wasn't just learning from him, he was also learning from her, a silent exchange that transcended language. Their bond deepened with every shared moment, every quiet observation, every unspoken understanding. Their bond deepened with every shared moment, every quiet observation, every unspoken understanding. One afternoon, as Elias was meticulously repairing a broken fence post, Alara, who had been silently watching him with her usual intense gaze, suddenly stiffened. Her eyes, usually so serene, widened, and a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer pulsed beneath her skin. She swayed slightly, placing a hand against her temple as if warding off a sudden headache. Elias, alarmed, dropped his tools and rushed to her side, his heart thudding with concern. He reached out to steady her, but before his hand could make contact, she spoke. Her voice, though still soft, was clear, devoid of the usual fragmented phrasing. My ship, it sought to echo." The words were delivered with a strangely detached cadence, as if she were relaying information from a distant source, yet the meaning resonated with stark clarity. Elias froze, his breath catching in his throat. This was it, a breakthrough, a coherent sentence, and one that hinted at depths he could scarcely imagine. He urged her gently. "An echo, Alara? What kind of echo?" She closed her eyes for a moment, a faint frown creasing her brow, before opening them again, now gleaming with a newfound clarity. "A signature. Of a lost light. My people, they send seeds. To find compatible vessels. To preserve what is lost." Each word was carefully chosen, like precious stones being placed into a mosaic, slowly building a picture in Elias's bewildered mind. The pieces, disparate and confusing until now, began to click into place with cold, terrifying precision. Elias felt a profound chill that had nothing to do with the crisp autumn air. His dawning realization was a tidal wave, crashing over him with brutal force. Alara wasn't just a lost alien child who happened to have Lyra's eyes. She wasn't merely a vessel for Lyra's spirit, an echo of her memory. The echo. The compatible vessel. The lost light. It was all pointing to Lyra herself. His Lyra. The impossible, the fantastical, was suddenly becoming terrifyingly real. Could it be that Lyra, somehow, was deeply, fundamentally connected to Alara's very existence? Had her essence, her genetic or emotional signature, been imprinted upon something, somewhere, only to be found and carried across the stars by this child? The thought was both staggering and heart-wrenching, twisting his grief into a bewildering tapestry of cosmic wonder and personal tragedy. Alara continued, her gaze fixed on something beyond Elias, as if accessing a vast internal database. "The ship, it carries, not conquest. Not war. It carries hope. For dispersal. For renewal. Our world, it was fading. We sent seeds. To find viable hosts. To plant new life, new knowledge, new us. Her words painted a picture of a dying civilization, desperately seeking a new path, a way to continue their legacy. This wasn't an invasion, it was an act of profound preservation, a last-ditch effort to keep something precious from vanishing into the void. The purpose of the ship, then, wasn't military might or resource extraction. It was an ark, but not of animals, rather of essence, of information, of life itself, seeking fertile ground in the vast cosmic ocean. Elara's small, delicate form was not merely a passenger but a crucial component of this grand, desperate mission. Elias thought of the broken, organic nature of the ship, the gentle light, the life-affirming abilities Elara possessed. It wasn't a weapon, it was a sanctuary, a seed pod carrying the last vestiges of a dying culture. The gravity of her words settled heavily upon Elias, transforming his small, personal tragedy into a piece of a much larger, interstellar narrative. His sorrow for Lyra, his protective instincts for Elara, now felt intertwined with the fate of an entire civilization. The crashed vessel in his field was not a harbinger of destruction, but of a profound, perhaps fragile, hope, brought to his doorstep by a child with his daughter's eyes. The crashed vessel in his field was not a harbinger of destruction, but of a profound, perhaps fragile, hope, brought to his doorstep by a child with his daughter's eyes. This hope, however, was about to face its harshest test. For weeks, Elias had diligently monitored the perimeter, but his aging, analog equipment was no match for the sophisticated instruments now being deployed. Unbeknownst to him, the anomalous energy signature emanating from the hidden crash site, though significantly dampened by Elara's abilities and Elias's efforts, had not gone entirely unnoticed. A sleek, almost silent drone, unlike any civilian model, ghosted over the distant tree-line, its advanced sensors sweeping across Elias's property. It wasn't looking for a crashed ship. It was detecting minute gravitational fluctuations, residual exotic matter, and a peculiar harmonic resonance that hinted at technology far beyond anything catalogued on Earth. This drone belonged to the Special Anomalies Response Team, a highly classified government agency tasked with investigating phenomena that defied conventional explanation. Their initial reports were puzzling, indicating a localized disruption of space-time and energetic signatures that flickered in and out of detection, almost as if something was actively trying to mask its presence. Their interest, once a distant hum, had now escalated into a focused, targeted investigation. Elias, tending his remaining crops one morning, felt an unusual prickle on the back of his neck, a sensation that had always heralded trouble on the farm. He glanced up, his eyes scanning the clear blue sky, but saw nothing. Yet a subtle shift in the air, a silence that felt too profound, warned him. He retreated to the farmhouse, his sense of unease growing with every step. Inside, Elara was seated by the window, her vibrant green eyes fixed on the distant horizon. Her small hand, usually so delicate, was clenched into a tight fist, and a faint, silver light pulsed more intensely beneath her skin than he had ever witnessed. "They are coming," she whispered, her voice laced with a tremor Elias hadn't heard before. The static, it grows louder. The certainty in her voice, coupled with the escalating energy signatures she was no doubt perceiving, sent a cold wave of dread through Elias. The threat of discovery, once a distant worry, was now imminent. He looked at Elara, her small frame radiating an almost palpable anxiety, and knew he had to make hard choices. Hiding her, protecting her, meant actively defying the authorities, risking everything he had left. But the thought of her being taken, examined, her unique essence stripped away by scientific curiosity, was unbearable. His paternal instincts, honed over decades of quiet devotion to Lyra, surged with renewed ferocity. He would not let them touch her. As Elara recovered more fully from the crash, her abilities, once subtle and almost accidental, became more pronounced, more controlled. He watched in awe, and a growing fear, as she demonstrated new facets of her alien physiology. One evening, frustrated by a flickering old lamp, she simply extended her hand towards it, and the dim light steadied, then intensified to a soft, warm glow, remaining perfectly stable despite the faulty wiring. Another time, a small, aggressive rodent that had been plaguing his pantry suddenly, inexplicably, turned docile, allowing Elara to gently pick it up and release it unharmed outside. She could make the old farmhouse hum with a gentle, calming energy, or, conversely, create a disorienting ripple in the air that made Elias feel momentarily dizzy. These weren't mere parlor tricks. They were manifestations of an advanced, intrinsic connection to the very fabric of reality, hinting at the profound capabilities of her species. These growing powers, while offering a glimmer of hope for their defense, also underscored the immense danger she represented to the human world, and the immense danger the human world represented to her. Her existence alone was a paradigm shift, a challenge to everything humanity believed about its place in the universe. Elias knew that if these abilities were ever witnessed by the wrong people, her fate would be sealed. He had to protect her, not just from physical capture, but from the very human fear and ignorance that would undoubtedly seek to exploit or destroy what they couldn't understand. The time for quiet concealment was drawing to a close. The time for action, for profound, desperate measures, was fast approaching. He squeezed Elara's hand, a silent promise passing between them. He would fight for her, as he had fought for Lyra, with every fiber of his being. He squeezed Elara's hand, a silent promise passing between them. He would fight for her, as he had fought for Lyra, with every fiber of his being. The time for quiet concealment was drawing to a close, and true to Elara's premonition, the first tangible sign of the outside world's encroachment arrived shortly thereafter, not with a bang, but a subtle whir. A low, metallic hum, distant at first, then growing steadily louder, penetrated the relative calm of the late afternoon. Elias, who had been anxiously scanning the sky from his porch, felt his stomach clench. "They are here," he murmured, his voice gruff. Elara, standing beside him, nodded, her emerald eyes narrowing, a faint silver shimmer tracing the delicate veins beneath her pale skin. The hum coalesced into the unmistakable drone of an observation drone, a sleek, black teardrop shape that appeared over the western ridge, too high and too fast to be a local farmer's equipment. It wasn't the military, not yet, but it was reconnaissance, the scouting party before the main force. Elias sprang into action, his years of rural living and quick thinking kicking in. "Inside, Elara, quickly!" he instructed, pushing her gently towards the farmhouse. "Stay low, don't move." He grabbed his old, dented toolbox, its contents a collection of wrenches, wires, and spare parts gleaned from decades of repairing antique farm machinery. His mind raced, calculating angles, remembering old tricks. The drone was likely equipped with thermal imaging and advanced optical sensors, designed to cut through camouflage and pinpoint anomalies. He moved with a surprising agility for his age, darting to his ancient, rusted tractor, a hulking relic that hadn't run in years but still held its formidable mass. He quickly attached a series of reflective tarpaulins he had salvaged from an old greenhouse, creating a crude, but potentially effective, shield. He wired up a series of old, high-intensity halogen lamps, normally used for nighttime harvesting, positioning them strategically. Then, he fired up the tractor's old, sputtering engine, letting its thick, black exhaust plume billow into the air, hoping to create a thermal decoy, a false signature that would confuse the drone's sensors. It was an old-school solution to a cutting-edge problem, a farmer's defiance against advanced surveillance. The drone, now directly overhead, slowed, its humming deepening as it descended slightly, its sensors undoubtedly locking onto the unexpected thermal and visual interference. Elias worked furiously, rerouting power from his solar panels to the lamps, making them flash erratically, creating an optical overload that would hopefully blind the drone's cameras, at least momentarily. He knew it was a temporary measure, a delaying tactic, but every second counted. Inside the farmhouse, Elara wasn't idle. Through the grimy window, Elias saw her standing, her hands outstretched slightly, not physically touching anything, but a faint, almost invisible ripple seemed to emanate from her. The old, crackling radio on the kitchen counter, long unused, suddenly sputtered to life, emitting a bizarre collage of static, fragmented voices, and what sounded eerily like the drone's own internal diagnostic chirps. It was a cacophony, a jumbled mess that would undoubtedly interfere with any remote communication or data upload the drone was attempting. She was using her abilities, not as a weapon, but as a shield, a subtle disruption that complemented Elias's more physical diversions. Her intelligence and resourcefulness were shining through, her understanding of complex energy fields now manifest as a defense mechanism. The drone, visibly confused, began to climb, its hum growing erratic, its movements jerky as it struggled to reconcile the conflicting data. It circled once more, then, with a final, frustrated whir, turned and sped back towards the horizon, disappearing as quickly as it had arrived. Elias watched it go, a ragged breath escaping his lungs. He slumped against the tractor, exhaustion washing over him. They had bought themselves time, but he knew this was just the beginning. He walked back into the farmhouse, his eyes meeting Elara's. She offered a small, tired smile, the silver light beneath her skin receding. "It will return," she stated, her voice softer now, but firm. Elias nodded, his own resolve hardening. He felt a profound sense of renewed purpose, a fierce determination he hadn't experienced since Lyra was a little girl, facing down childhood bullies. He had fought for Lyra then, protected her from the small cruelties of the world. Now, he was fighting for Elara, for this surrogate granddaughter, against forces he barely understood, but whose intentions he instinctively distrusted. This wasn't just about saving an alien, it was about honoring Lyra's memory, embracing the unexpected gift she had sent him across the stars. This time, he wouldn't let anyone take away what he loved. The emotional stakes had never been higher. He would defend Elara with his last breath. He would defend Elara with his last breath. The emotional stakes had never been higher, not since the day he lost Lyra. But now, with a clarity that sliced through the lingering grief and confusion, Elias understood why Elara had come to him, why her eyes mirrored Lyra's, and why that single word, "Grandpa," had been the key. One evening, after another tense day of monitoring the skies and subtly reinforcing their perimeter, Elara sat across from him at the old wooden table. Her small hands, usually so restless, were still, resting on the smooth surface. The electric lamp, now stabilized by her almost unconscious influence, cast a warm, steady glow, highlighting the ethereal quality of her skin. She looked up, her emerald eyes meeting his, and this time, there was no hesitation, no fragmented speech. It was as if the recent confrontation, the shared act of defiance against the probing drone, had solidified her purpose, unblocked something vital within her. "Elias," she began, her voice a soft, melodic hum that resonated through the quiet kitchen. "I am a seed from a dying star. My people, we called them the Lyrians. We faced extinction. Not from war, but from entropy, from the loss of our own stellar heart. Before our final fading, we cast out fragments of ourselves, echoes encoded in bioluminescent matrices, designed to seek compatible environments, to find guardians." Elias listened, mesmerized, his own breathing shallow. A seed. Not a person in the way he understood, but a living, sentient vessel of memory, of essence. The concept stretched his mind, twisted his understanding of life itself. "Years ago," Elara continued, her gaze distant, as if seeing beyond the confines of the farmhouse, "your Lyra, she was drawn to an energy signature. A residual field from an ancient scout probe, buried deep beneath this very land, unseen by your technology." Elara gestured vaguely towards the floor. "The probe was a precursor, a beacon. It recorded the local biosignature, seeking prime candidates for our dispersal. Your Lyra, her essence, her genetic and emotional blueprint, resonated with the Lyrian matrix. It was a perfect match. Her spirit, her innate compassion, her resilience, it was all imprinted, a perfect echo." Elias felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Lyra. His Lyra. Unknowingly, she had encountered something alien, something that had captured her very being. The pieces clicked into place, brutally, beautifully. Elara wasn't Lyra reincarnated, but a living, breathing, alien vessel carrying Lyra's essence, a ghost made flesh. "I am that echo," Elara affirmed, her hand gently touching her chest. They sent me, the Lyrians, to find the source of that resonance, to find the guardian whose emotional signature perfectly matched the imprinted memory. A guardian who would nurture this seed, who would understand the echo of lost light. A guardian who was you, Grandpa. The last word, spoken with a new, profound tenderness, sent a shiver through Elias. It wasn't just a word, it was destiny, a cosmic connection forged through grief and an impossible scientific marvel. His mind reeled, trying to grasp the enormity of it. Lyra had touched something ancient, something alien, and in doing so, had become a blueprint, a living memory. And Elara, this fragile, powerful girl, was the manifestation of that blueprint, sent across light years to find him. It wasn't a cruel trick of the universe. It was a profound, heartbreaking gift. Lyra, even in death, had reached out to him, through Elara. My journey, Elara concluded, her voice gaining a quiet conviction, was to find you. To establish this bridge, this connection, so the seed of Lyrian memory, infused with Lyra's essence, could find a home, a new star to bloom under. My ship, it is not for conquest. It is an ark. A vessel of life, carrying the last vestiges of my people's knowledge, their culture, their very genetic code. It was sent to find fertile ground, a compatible guardian, to begin anew. Elias stared at her, tears blurring his vision. His grief for Lyra, so long a desolate landscape, was now interwoven with a wondrous, terrifying cosmic purpose. Elara was not merely a memory, she was a continuation, a vibrant, living testament to Lyra's spirit, brought to him by the stars. His furrowed face softened, a profound understanding blossoming within him. The crashed ship wasn't a wound in his field. It was a portal, bringing a final, impossible message from his daughter, a legacy beyond his wildest dreams. He realized then, with an unshakable certainty, that his purpose was clearer than ever. He wasn't just guarding a secret, he was guarding a future, a legacy that encompassed both Lyra and the dying Lyrian civilization. This responsibility, immense as it was, filled him not with dread, but with a renewed determination. He would protect this seed, this echo, this impossible gift from Lyra, with every fiber of his being. He would ensure this new life, this profound hope, would bloom. He would ensure this new life, this profound hope, would bloom. The sheer magnitude of Elara's revelation left Elias breathless, trembling not from fear, but from an overwhelming sense of cosmic wonder and personal destiny. He had always believed Lyra was gone forever, swallowed by the cold indifference of the universe. Now, an alien child, a living, breathing testament to his daughter's enduring spirit, sat before him, explaining a legacy that stretched across light years. My ship, Elara continued, her voice soft but filled with ancient wisdom. It is not merely a transport. It is an ark. Within its core, it carries the culmination of Lyrian civilization, carefully preserved. Our histories, our sciences, our arts, the genetic diversity of our people, all held in crystalline memory, awaiting activation on a new, compatible world. It is a time capsule, a seed bank, designed to disseminate our essence, to find fertile ground for a rebirth. Your world, Elias, with its vibrant biology and its unique emotional resonance, was deemed a prime candidate for dispersal. Elias stared at her, the pieces of the puzzle slotting into place with terrifying precision. The organic materials of the ship, the bioluminescent growths, Elara's own life-affirming abilities, it all made sense. The craft wasn't a vessel of war or exploration as humans understood it. It was a sanctuary, a womb, a repository of a dying culture's final hope. And Lyra, his Lyra, had been the unwitting key, her unique essence providing the genetic and emotional signature needed to activate this incredible, desperate mission. A profound understanding settled over Elias, weighing heavily on his heart, yet simultaneously lifting a burden he hadn't realized he still carried. Elara was not Lyra, reincarnated or replaced. That idea, while initially comforting, had also been a source of subtle pain, a conflict with his deep-seated grief. Instead, Elara was something far more extraordinary, more beautiful. She was a living embodiment of Lyra's spirit, a genetic echo imprinted with his daughter's very essence, a gift from the stars, chosen to find him, to bring him a purpose beyond his desolate existence. His Lyra, even in death, had orchestrated this miracle, a final, boundless act of love that transcended time and space. His grief, once a raw, unyielding wound, didn't vanish, but it underwent a profound metamorphosis. The sharp edges softened, transforming into a deep well of wonder and an almost dizzying sense of responsibility. Elara, with her Lyra green eyes and her alien wisdom, was a living bridge between his painful past and an impossibly grand future. He had thought his life was winding down, a solitary walk towards an inevitable end. Now, it was just beginning, imbued with a cosmic significance he could never have dreamed of. He was not merely an old farmer. He was a guardian, a custodian of a new beginning, a surrogate grandfather to the last hope of an alien civilization, fused with the enduring spirit of his own lost daughter. The weight of this knowledge was immense, almost crushing, but it was also exhilarating. His protectiveness towards Elara intensified, solidifying into an unwavering resolve. He would protect this seed, this echo, this precious legacy. He would ensure that this incredible fusion of Lyrian hope and Lyra's spirit found its place, bloomed, and contributed its unique essence to this new world. The crashed ship in his field was no longer a disaster. It was a promise, a testament to the universe's endless capacity for wonder and connection. Elias Vance, the reclusive old farmer, had found not a replacement for his daughter, but a continuation of her spirit, a grand, universal purpose in the twilight years of his life. He would ensure this new life, this profound hope, would bloom. He would ensure this new life, this profound hope, would bloom. Elias felt the immense weight of this promise settle over him, a responsibility both daunting and exhilarating. He had found not just a connection to Lyra, but a renewed purpose that stretched beyond the confines of his farm, beyond even the planet. Clasping Elara's small, cool hand in his, he looked at her, his vision momentarily blurred by unshed tears. "We will, Elara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We will make sure it blooms." But the universe, or perhaps just the relentless march of bureaucracy, had a way of reminding them that hopes and promises often met harsh realities. The temporary reprieve from the reconnaissance drone was just that, temporary. The very next morning, the peaceful pre-dawn quiet of Elias's farm was shattered by a cacophony of approaching sounds, the throbbing beat of rotor blades, the distant whine of ground vehicles, and the unmistakable, authoritative squawk of a public address system. "This is the Federal Interdiction Agency. Elias Vance, this property is under federal lockdown. Any resistance will be met with force. I repeat, any resistance will be met with force." The voice, amplified and distorted, echoed across the fields, wiping away any illusion of secrecy. Elias's jaw tightened. They were here. Not just a drone, not just a recon team, but the full, unyielding force of a government agency. He looked at Elara, her face pale, her green eyes wide with a mixture of fear and a steely resolve he hadn't seen before. The silver light beneath her skin pulsed rapidly, reflecting the urgency of the moment. She was scared, but also ready. "They have pinpointed the location of the vessel," Elara said, her voice strained. "My masking protocols, they are weakening. The energy signature is too great, even with your diversions." Elias nodded grimly. He had expected this. His old farming tricks were never meant to hold off a determined government agency with advanced technology. "What now, Elara?" he asked, not with despair, but with a quiet challenge in his tone. "What can we do?" Elara looked towards the window, her gaze fixed on the approaching armada of official vehicles and heavily armed personnel. Her delicate brow furrowed in concentration. "There is a choice," she began slowly. "The Ark, my vessel, possesses a full range of capabilities: defensive, offensive, and revelation." Elias waited, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "Revelation? I can activate them," she explained, her voice gaining strength. The full spectrum of the ship's systems. It would cloak the entire area, rendering us invisible, untraceable. Or, I can initiate a full spectrum broadcast. An overture. A message to humanity. Revealing not just my presence, but the existence of my people, our plight, our hope. It would shift their reality. Permanently. The weight of her words hung in the air, thick and heavy. This wasn't just about hiding a crashed ship anymore. It was about the fate of an alien civilization, and potentially, the entire human species. Elara, a seed of memory, was faced with a decision that transcended her original programming, a choice that could redefine two worlds. Elias realized then that her original mission, to find a compatible environment and a guardian, was almost complete. Now, she was more than just an echo, she was a sentient being, forged in the crucible of a dying star and refined by the love of an old farmer. What do you want to do, Elara? Elias asked, his voice steady. He wouldn't influence her, wouldn't tell her what was right. This was her choice, born of her unique journey. His role was simply to stand by her, to empower her. Elara turned from the window, her vibrant green eyes locking onto his. In their depths, Elias saw not just Lyra's spirit, but the ancient wisdom of a dying civilization, and the nascent will of a new, powerful being. The love and trust he had unconditionally offered her, the safety he had desperately tried to provide, had done more than just heal her physical wounds. It had allowed her to grow, to evolve beyond her programming, to become truly autonomous. His unwavering love, his simple, human connection, had empowered her to make a decision that transcended her original, programmed mission. She was no longer just a seed, she was a gardener, choosing how and when her legacy would bloom. I will choose, Elara finally said, her voice clear and strong. But first, I need to show them. I need to show them what Lyra saw. I will choose, Elara finally said, her voice clear and strong. But first, I need to show them. I need to show them what Lyra saw. Elias watched, his heart a turbulent mix of pride and trepidation, as Elara turned fully towards the window, her small frame radiating an almost palpable energy. The approaching vehicles were now visible, a convoy of black SUVs and armored personnel carriers rumbling down the dirt road that led to his farmhouse. Armed figures, tiny from this distance but unmistakably menacing, were already deploying, fanning out across his fields. The metallic glint of their weapons caught the morning sun. Inside the house, the air hummed with Elara's focused power. The lamp flickered wildly for a moment, then steadied into an intense, pure white glow that seemed to emanate from Elara herself. Her green eyes, usually so deep and mysterious, now blazed with a fierce, unwavering light. They seek the anomaly, Elara stated, her voice layered with an ancient resonance that seemed to vibrate through the very walls. They feel its presence. I will show them its absence. Her slender hands, with their impossibly graceful fingers, rose slowly, palms facing outwards towards the approaching threat. Elias felt a profound shift in the air, a subtle distortion of light and sound. Like looking through heat haze on a summer road, but far more precise, far more encompassing. He saw the first of the armed personnel halt abruptly, their movements jerky, almost confused. Their comms crackled with static, a telltale sign of Elara's subtle interference. A shimmering curtain, transparent yet undeniably present, began to rise from the ground, emanating from a wide radius around the farmhouse and extending outwards to encompass the entire crashed ship and a substantial portion of his field. It wasn't a physical barrier, but something far more sophisticated. Elias blinked, and blinked again. The black SUVs, the armed figures, the entire convoy, seemed to waver, then almost entirely vanish from his sight. He could still perceive them, a faint, ghostly outline where they should be, but they were no longer truly there. The land where the ship lay, the very field where it had crashed, now appeared utterly mundane, an untouched expanse of dormant soil, free of craters or wreckage. The cloaking field, Elara's ultimate defense, was active. Outside, confusion reigned. The lead agent, a stern-faced woman named Director Thorne, squinted at her tactical display. What the hell? It just blinked out. Thermal, optical, gravitational signatures. All gone. It's like it was never there. Her team, equally bewildered, scoured the now empty field with their sensors, finding nothing but the expected readings of an ordinary farm. Frustration mounted. They had tracked the anomaly to this precise location, yet it had vanished as if into thin air. After hours of fruitless searching, deploying every piece of advanced tech at their disposal, they had no choice but to retreat, leaving only a lingering sense of inexplicable failure behind them. Inside the now silent farmhouse, Alara lowered her hands, a faint exhaustion coloring her features. The intense glow in her eyes dimmed, returning to their familiar, deep emerald. The air, which had thrummed with power, now settled back into its comfortable warmth. "It will hold," she murmured, turning to Elias. "For now, they will see nothing. They will believe it was a phantom, an illusion." Elias knelt before her, pulling her into a gentle embrace that he had so desperately yearned to share with Lyra. He stroked her silver hair, a wave of profound relief washing over him. They were safe. For now they were safe. He understood Alara's decision. To reveal herself, to broadcast her people's existence, would have plunged humanity into an immediate, potentially catastrophic paradigm shift. Instead, she had chosen discretion, a slow, deliberate integration of knowledge, allowing time for understanding, for growth. It was a testament to her wisdom, a wisdom far beyond her apparent years. In the quiet days and months that followed, life on the farm took on a new, extraordinary rhythm. The farmhouse, once a monument to Elias's grief and isolation, became a sanctuary of shared purpose. Alara, with Elias's patient guidance, began to learn more about humanity, about its history, its hopes, its many flaws and triumphs. And Elias, in turn, began to learn from Alara, not just about the advanced sciences and philosophies of the Lyrians, but about the profound interconnectedness of all life in the cosmos. He found not a replacement for Lyra, but a continuation of her spirit, a living legacy that had traveled across the stars to find him. Alara was Lyra's echo, infused with the wisdom of an ancient civilization, and in her, Elias found a grand, universal purpose in his twilight years. His loneliness melted away, replaced by the warmth of companionship, the quiet joy of rediscovering fatherhood in the most improbable of circumstances. Alara knew she had found more than just a compatible environment. She had found a home, a true guardian, a family. The seed of Lyrian hope, infused with Lyra's essence, had finally found its fertile ground, its beacon in the vast, dark emptiness between the stars. And in the heart of an old farmer, a new bloom of life, of hope, of love, finally began to unfurl, reaching for the cosmic light. If you were moved by Elias and Alara's journey, if their tale of sorrow, discovery, and cosmic connection touched your heart, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and join us for our next story of Unlikely Heroes, where the ordinary meets the extraordinary, and the universe whispers its secrets to those who dare to listen.